Welcome to this Airmic webinar on practical uses for robotics and intelligent automation, produced in collaboration with QBE. My name is Richard Cutcher, Research and Development Manager at Airmic, and I'm delighted to say I am joined by 3 QBE experts in this area. Before we get into the detail of this presentation, I would like to introduce them to you and let them tell you a little bit about their own role. First, we have Amit Dixit, Head of Operational Excellence. Amit, hello.
Good afternoon, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. By way of introduction, I head up Operation Excellence in QBE. Primarily, my role involves driving process excellence within the organization and also driving the robotics process automation within the organization.
Thank you, Amit. And also Scott Jacobs, Service Excellence Manager for Claims.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Scott Jacobs, and my role is primarily about challenging and changing and operationalization of improvements and efficiency improvements within QBE core claims.
And then lastly, but not, Lucy Costin, Innovation Hub Manager.
Good afternoon. My role is to lead our Claims Innovation Hub, which looks at how we can use new technology or new ideas and bring them into claims to try and help future-proof ourselves, basically.
Great. So we're going to have a 30-minute presentation in which we will explore what we mean by robotics and intelligent automation in insurance, how it is benefiting claims, how QBE is implementing these tools into their systems, before wrapping up all of these developments, how they will impact Airmic members and corporate insurance buyers. During the presentation, we are also going to display 3 interactive polling questions for our audience to participate in, so please do engage with those. We will then have time for questions at the end, so please submit those through the webinar dashboard and we will get onto those at the end. But first, Amit, can you just outline for us what we mean by intelligent automation in this current context?
Yeah, it's a very good question that you asked, Richard. To me, it's a combination of number of rapidly evolving technologies. In the current context, I would say I see 3 different aspects to intelligent automations, and these 3 aspects, when they come together, they're going to significantly change, how businesses operate across the entire value chain. So one of the first ones is ability to read unstructured data and images. This is what the industry refers to as digital readers. It basically looks at converting the images into text that can be interpreted further. The second aspect of all of this is interpreting and applying intelligence over the data that has been extracted, plus recommending the right next action. Now again, there are tons of terms that are used to describe this, right from machine learning, artificial intelligence, but we prefer to call it as, or the industry prefers to call it as, the digital thinker. So again, it's all about analyzing trends, patterns, data, and recommending action. And the final one is all about an aspect where the technology mirrors an action that a human takes, which we refer to as digital worker, and also robotic process automation. Across the spectrum of these 3 things, there's a significant investment that's happening, right from established players to new startups. Around the block, there is always someone new who's coming up with new technologies or new innovations along these 3 aspects. But yeah, to summarize, it's the digital reader, the digital thinker, and the digital worker, combined together is what the industry is referring to as intelligent automation.
Great then, and can you expand further on the digital worker RPA aspects of this?
Sure. But actually, before I answer that question, let me tell you a quick story. About a year and a half back, we were promoting the success of our RPA to senior management within the organization. And one of the senior operations manager came over to where we sit in and was saying, okay, where is the robot? Where is the physical bot? and it took a bit of explaining to say that RPA is nothing to do with the physical bot. At the end of the day, it's a sophisticated macro. And what this technology does is it partially or fully automates repetitive human activities that are pretty manual and rule-based. It essentially interacts with screens of the underlying applications that the users work with and updates the fields by pulling the relevant data from where it is needed. And for those of you who have been around long enough, you may have heard of a technology called as screen scraping, which was out there in 1990s. It was used on mainframes, and the RPA is the next generation of screen scraping. It's a lot more sophisticated. It's a lot more robust. It has a bit of intelligence built into it, and you don't write heavy software and code behind it. It's all pretty configurable. There are a couple of components to RPA, Richard. One, what we call as an assisted automation, where a human triggers that automation, and the second we refer to as unassisted automation. So this is where the automation is scheduled, or it waits for a trigger for it to kickstart. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of players. It's a rapidly evolving field, and just to give a flavor to some of our listeners, you would have heard of Blue Prism, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Pega OpenSpan, Robotics. There are a number of tools that are out there. And again, the costing models of all of these differ. In some instances, it is dependent on number of transactions that a bot executes. In certain instances, it is dependent on the number of users who have access to the bot. And all of these guys are significantly enhancing their offering. So the question then becomes, what is it that the technology can do? So as you can see on the screen, at a tactical level, it does copy and paste. It can open emails, attachments. It can log on to applications. It can fill certain screens. So there's a lot that it can do on a tactical level. Well, if you talk about strategically, there are tons of reports out from the Big Four, the McKinsey's, and they're saying, McKinsey was saying, I read a report recently where McKinsey's view was it has a potential economic impact of 6.7 trillion by 2025. And this is the second largest economic impact, just behind the rise of mobile internet and smartphones. Yeah, so pretty powerful.
Great, thank you, Amit. So Lucy, can you just describe for us the QBE journey through implementation, some of these techniques?
Sure. I think first of all, it's important to say that the desire and the pull for doing this within QBE came from the business unit owners. So it's not something that someone in head office has dreamt up and said, we should do this, this is a great idea. It's something where the claims and operations communities and the people that work there day to day have said, we need to start doing this. It's really important to us. Primarily that requirement came from the claims area to begin with, because they operate in a very high volume transactional environment. But we were absolutely knocking on an open door, which made it a lot easier to get started. So late 2017 was when we initially started looking at the technology, and we also identified and prioritized potential use cases. And these were typically very repetitive administrative tasks, which are vital to the process, must get done, but add no value at all. So to begin with, we used a supplier partner for the development rather than investing in internal capability, to see how things went before really stumping up a big chunk of cash. Our first robot went live in spring 2018, and that was processing claim payments, which is very successful. So the decision to invest in internal capability was made in mid-2018, based on that success. And we started to build our own team internally. At this stage, most of the opportunities for automation were in claims, but as we progressed through 2019, we have started to identify opportunities in underwriting and operations as well. This year has been really focused on getting more robots in where they can be best utilised, and also on developing the governance and the best practice around automation and improving how we engage with other areas of the business. We're now starting to really see the benefits coming through. So, little stat, we've processed over 400,000 transactions via automation, and it's really freeing up time for our people to do much more value-adding work.
And just to add to what Lucy was saying, in a span of last 12 months, our bot state has grown from about 6 to 8 to about 22 different bots. So yeah, there has been a significant uptake on some of the usage of bots within QBE.
Yeah.
So Scott, moving on to claims specifically, how are you seeing automation benefiting claims?
Yeah, it's a good question to pose on that, and I think to answer the how, we need to answer the why as to why we've been successful in this space. And I think a good place to start with that is why is claims suited to automation? And Lucy alluded to the fact that large parts of claims processing is very rule-based and often involve high-level and low-level transactional processes. But conversely, one of the challenges that many insurers seem to face, and particularly in the commercial space, is that while variation for the customer is great in terms of intermediaries and brokers and different input channels, on the flip side, variation within a process for an insurer is a real challenge. And what we believe is that robotics has been successful because it provides a more agile, lighter touch, business-led approach to technology transformation. And that assists with us navigating through the variation that sits within the process and really allows the business to change that for themselves. So to explain why we believe we've been successful in QBE, I'm just going to briefly talk through a couple of our early case studies that bring this to life. And the first one is the automation we've brought in that saves emails down to our claims center. And I believe this really illustrates one of our key achievements, which is, as Lucy alluded to, is the creation of an in-house capability. And specifically in our claims department, we now have a change function that includes 20 years worth of experience at a claims handler level. So this is really something that cannot be overestimated, in my opinion, because first-hand user experience has proved invaluable in the success of our automation journey so far. And for one example, we have a claims developer that joined us 7 years ago as a handler. They progressed through to a lean engineer, and now they are subsequently a robotic developer. And one of the projects that they worked on, one of the first projects they worked on, was, as I said, the process of saving emails down to our claims database. Now, that process, the previous process as it was, involved adding a number of fields of data into the system, navigating through a couple of different user interfaces to save each individual email down. That took about 17 clicks and 30 seconds per email. So on the face of it, doesn't sound like too much of a big piece. But when you aggregate that up against the whole of our claims department and every user getting 20 to 30 emails a day, it's a massive drain on time and resource. So this developer, through directly understanding the pains of the end user, was able to successfully create a piece of automation that now allows the handler to simply drag and drop their email into a specifically named folder on the left-hand side, and then what the automation will do is the automation will take that email and it will populate all the different fields in that middle box on the screenshot there that a handler would normally have to do, and then that would then automatically feed through to our workflow. So we've gone down from 17 clicks down to about 4, and it's saving us on average over 120 hours a week. But the other key benefit for this particular automation is that it's improving our day-to-day end user experience. For me, the second reason what we believe behind our success is the appreciation that if you're really going to maximize the benefits of robotics usage, there's an appreciation that there needs to be a slice of re-engineering of a process that wraps around the build. And it's safe to say that virtually all of our robotics builds have involved an element of engineering of the process. And a prime example of this is the second one we can see on here, which is our CMS payments. So when we originally looked at this automation, we were specifically looking at automation of our windscreen claims. And then what we quickly realized was that if we took a slightly wider view and made the robot solution more generic, but then further re-engineered a number of processes, we could relatively quickly expand this automation out for a range of other suppliers and also other similar but unrelated transactions. Now that in itself caused a bit of a challenge, because some of our suppliers were billing us via bordereaux, via PDF documents, via individual invoicing still. So what we had to do was work with all of our different suppliers and align them into one sort of format. When we were able to do that, we could transpose 30 different supply inputs into one QBE input format, and that meant that rather than having to build a separate automation for each part of the process, we could feed all of that into one format, and then the automation would carry on with that. And then through standardization of that input, this bot was not only able to just do windscreen claims, but it can also now process payments, reserve movements, recoveries, claim updates from all of our key suppliers. And the impact of this was great, because on the face of it, we were looking at a potential of around 200 transactions a week, but purely through the re-engineering of the process that sat around that automation, that is now moving up to 1,500 a week. And the added benefit of this automation is also that we're removing rework from the process, because we're eradicating the removal of any keying errors or the removal of any aged debt across our estate. So that's just a flavour of some of our early automations. But now the question really for us is, where are we taking claims now? So if we can just flip on to the next slide, there we go. At the end of last year, we really decided to take stock of our automation journey in claims and see what we could do better and see what we could do to further enhance the journey. And what we really realized was that while the automations have been largely successful, we'd kind of taken quite a tactical approach, and we'd re-engineered some of our current processes to fit the automation into our existing working practices. So we decided to this year take a little think outside the box and try something a little bit different. And this is where our bionic claims proposition has been created from. And bionic claims is about two broad concepts. So the first concept is about taking a strategic approach to our capabilities and understanding what is possible, but also what our current limitations are, and most importantly is what we don't actually want to automate. So we realize that people still form the fabric of our organization, and customers still want to talk to us in a time of need. So the concept here is more around focused on getting robots and people to work seamlessly together, rather than a quest to digitize everything immediately. So the second concept around this is really the way we have approached a bionic proposition. And as I said earlier, it's instead of trying to fit automations into our existing processes, we've actually designed a claims structure and process that is centered around our automation capabilities. So if we look at those boxes on the bottom there, referring to the first one, we've tried to create an efficient business process. So we've sat with the end user and we've removed waste from the as-is process, because there's sometimes a lot of waste in the process that we don't actually need and we don't need to automate. We then defined what the customer perspective is, and we've created a structure that maximizes the flow of a claim and responds to the customer pull. And then what we've done on top of that is we've interwoven all of that piece of technology and the development of robotics and various bits of technology into the actual process now. So the processing of a claim is tightly interwoven with all of our technology. So we have robots that are carrying out a number of functions that the claims handler doesn't even see. And then we also have a number of functions that the claims handler has a trigger that says to them, this piece of work has now been done, this now piece of work needs to be done by yourself. And what we look at this is to visualize it, we kind of see it like a conveyor belt where various bits of automation, so we have 8 different robots servicing this one particular team, and those 8 robots are moving things along incrementally on a conveyor belt, and then what the handler is there to do is to do some quality check, make some key decisions, and then to move those pieces of work from one production line to the next. The final bit of that, which again really shouldn't be forgotten about, is the human element. And so the human element for us is embedded over the top of all of that. And the human element is to provide that high level of customer service. So carrying out key decisions and actions and making sure the customer is at the forefront of what we're doing. So while it's early days on our bionic mission, we're seeing some very impressive results coming through. We're seeing a 50% reduction in our number of touch points on our bionic claims compared to non-bionic, and we're actually seeing over 60% reduction in our claims lifecycle, which is, it's quite an impressive stat to be there. And the plan now is to take this bionic mission as a set of principles and expand this out across all of our other lines of business. So it's becoming our strategic vision of where we wish to take claims in QBE, which is using the core principles of thinking differently and driving end user behavior and building a model around automation, while ensuring that we continue to ensure the main focus is on providing the highest level of customer service.
Great, thanks, Scott. Well, sounds like obviously plenty of work being done in the background at QBE. So Amit, what have been some of the lessons learned during this process and some of the challenges of implementation?
Yeah, so the first point, this is simple. This is not complicated. RPA is not complicated. It's quite straightforward. You can learn the technology and be up and running within a period of 2 to 3 months. So while individuals in your organization are learning this technology, you need to work with IT to make sure the right infrastructure is in place. I'll also say, and I think Scott alluded to it on a couple of occasions, which is identifying the right opportunity to automate is absolutely critical, right? Because once you understand the power of this technology and how simple it is, there'll be a temptation for you to automate any and everything. But what you don't want to do is build in tons of automation, because then it will cause you headache in terms of maintenance and servicing of all of those. So just go for the right opportunities where you have high transactional volumes, where data is structured and the processes are matured. In addition, I would also say proximity to business is absolutely key. So as Lucy mentioned earlier, we started with a couple of developers offshore, and then we realized that if you are working on that model, then it becomes a typical software development lifecycle, and it's focused on massive amount of documentation to be shipped offshore. And hence we took a very different approach, and we built this entire capability in-house, where the engineers were sitting next to a claims handler, or in one of the instances, the claim handlers became one of the automation engineers, and the speed of delivery was phenomenal. So that's what I would heavily recommend, that make sure that the team is close to the business. And my final point would be, it's not IT, right? It has components of IT. There is a dependency on IT, but it is not IT, because at the end of the day, this technology interacts with the screens that IT have built in. It does not interact with the code that is sitting behind it, and hence the digital worker aspect of it. It can impact IT in terms of if you're pushing through tons of transactions on a system that is not used to that volume of transaction, then yes, the system may slow down and the users may feel an impact. And so that's where you just need to make sure that your IT colleagues are aware that you're putting bots on top of it. But equally, they need to be aware that bots are operating on the landscape, purely because they may put in a change which may break the bots. So a right partnership needs to be developed with our colleagues in IT. So those were the key lessons that we learned. In terms of challenges, I would say our single biggest challenge was upskilling the organization on what robotics is, because when we started 2 years back, this was all pretty new. So there were lots of questions about, what if the bots go rogue? And it was a question of us explaining that the bots don't go rogue, because they just work with the application. They don't touch the software sitting behind the application. They only interact with the screens. And again, there was a lot of fear of unknown from our risk guys, cybersecurity guys, and as to what it is. And I must admit, we all went on a journey with this, right? Whereby we all learned about the technology as it evolved. And I think the final bit is, the technology interacts with screens. And what we found in our estate was, our production screens were a tiny bit different to, some of our test or pre-production environment. So, from a technical point of view, the bot just could not have access to the same screens, the same set of screens, which an end user would have. But again, working with our IT colleagues, we were able to overcome some of this. So yeah, those were the key things that we took away from this, Richard.
Great. Well, Scott, one of the really key questions for kind of Airmic members and other corporate insurance buyers is how are you seeing, or how are we expecting to see RPA have an impact on those kind of commercial buyers of insurance or in the future?
Sure, and I think that's obviously a key question that underpins all of this. And for me, I kind of categorize this into two areas, which is indirect and direct impact on the customer. And I think what we see a lot of at the moment is a lot of indirect impact, whereby the customer may not see this firsthand, the impact that automation is having, but what it is doing is removing a lot of non-value adding tasks from the process, and it's allowing our people to recalibrate their working practices. So they're having more time to make more quality decisions, make quicker responses, and have more focus on the customer. And we're starting to see this through things like reduced life cycles, reduced errors, settlement of first-party claims a lot quicker, and a decreased indemnity line spend in certain areas of the business where we have control over that. I think what we really want to move into now is that space of where it can directly impact the customer. So we're just starting to see some strands of that now. We've got a pilot going where we're trialing some automated broker updates, and that's going out across some of our lines of business at the moment. And in general, there's a lot of technology evolving at the moment that's almost reaching a level where we really would like to use it. So things like optical character recognition, emotive recognition, even things like image recognition. So when you can take 3 or 4 pictures of your vehicle, and it will automatically value the vehicle or value the damage. All of these things will have a really big positive impact on the customer. But I think for me, the key thing is at the moment, it's that real reduction in non-value adding tasks that's allowing us to recalibrate the workforce to focus more on the customer.
I'd agree absolutely with that. It's all about trying to find ways to channel the time that is freed up by using automation and robotics to help the customer, rather than just say, oh great, we've managed to cut some costs or cut some processing and that's it, we keep everything the same. So it's moving the focus towards, can we add more value with the people that we have and use their skill sets better, rather than getting them to do repetitive administrative processing tasks.
Great, thank you Amit, Scott and Lucy for that presentation. We're now able to take some questions from those who have logged in, and we have had a few already come in. So the first one was, you've given us a glimpse into how QBE have embarked on this journey over the past 3 years. How much further transformation do you think is required within insurers, QBE and others, to deliver the benefits of robotics and intelligent automation across all lines and across multiple kind of business sectors and units as well?
I think so. I'll go first. In my view, we've just started with all of this. As I mentioned, there's a massive amount of investment and upskilling of the technology that is happening. So we talked about the digital reader and the digital thinker. There's a lot to be done in that space. But once all of these three comes together, I can very well see from an underwriting point of view, and Lucy and Claim can talk about Lucy and Scott can talk about claims, is a massive shift. So again, in the commercial insurance value chain, you could have scenarios where submissions are coming in, which are digitally read by a reader. A digital worker will extract information from those submissions, probably key it into your submission management system or underwriting systems. Do a bit of underwriting on the underwriter's behalf, and even go and populate some of the rating tools. And that's where a human comes in, right? Because that's where the human adds the value, whereby they look into the submission and apply their own judgment and say, okay, what do you want to do with the submission that has come in? And so it will probably automate a lot of the first part of the value chain, and probably recommend certain actions as well. But as I said, it's about 3 to 5 years away, in my view.
Great. And a question from Marina, one of our members here. Have you already seen a decrease in the claims personnel headcount as a result of automation?
We freed up time, but we haven't made sweeping cuts to our headcount. We have tried to redeploy the time and the people skills into more value-adding things. So where perhaps in the past our claims adjusters would have spent so much time processing and doing lots of admin that they wouldn't really have had time to speak to customers on the phone, we're now giving them more time to have that more personal interaction with clients, where it's more valuable and help build relationships, rather than say, actually, we freed up a load of time, so let's get rid of people. So potentially we could have done that, but we haven't.
Great. And yeah,
so just to add to that, it's not about the headcount. Yes, the headcount is freed up. It's a good question, but it's also about the data quality, because by using all of this, the data quality that gets into your estate becomes a lot better, because it is not prone to fat finger issues or any of that. And so we have seen a significant improvement in the data that is getting into our estate. And if you fast forward, data is the key, right? In a few years, we'll be significantly relying on data and data accuracy. So that's another point to consider.
And do you think there'll be particular lines or insurance products that you expect these processes to have a bigger impact for corporate clients? And also the reverse to that, are there particular lines will be particularly challenging, do you think, in terms of adding this automation element?
I think automation is more suited to the volume transactional type claims. So motor is typical one that people start with. Property claims, quite often low value ones as well, and low value personal injury, where you've got a lot of claims which have very similar characteristics and you can standardize them. That's where you can put automation in place. And that's probably the right thing to do. I think that gives you better results. It allows you to put more predictive analytics across it and data modeling. But when we're talking about complex, high value claims, which could be personal injury, or they could be professional negligence type claims, I think then you're always going to want the human touch. I'm not sure that the clients would be comfortable with a very, very complicated, large value claim with lots of nuances and complications, potentially reputational damage to their firm, being handled by a robot. But absolutely, you can automate the processes around that. So things like making a payment, that is a system process that is easy enough to automate. Updating a piece of information on a form or on a system, again, can typically be done by automation. But as I say, I think complex claims will always need to be done, and should always be done, by a human who can give that more personal service.
And Scott, I think I heard you wanting to jump in on that answer as well. Was there anything you wanted to add?
Other than to totally agree with what Lucy was saying there, I think the key piece along all of this is understanding, and I think Amit alluded to it in the lessons learned, is understanding what to automate. And again, I think we're trying to do that in our bionic approach, which is we think we're gaining an understanding of what we believe we should and could automate, but more importantly, it's also what we shouldn't be doing that, and at a time of need, particularly in a complex high value case or a sensitive case, the customer does want to talk to someone. But I think the main point to take away from that is that this piece of technology allows the potential for you to think like that, where previously it was only a case of, well, okay, we could possibly offshore some items, or we could possibly employ another 20 or 30 heads. Actually, this gives you the capability to start thinking a bit differently about things like that.
Great, and I think just the last question, unless we have any more come in the next few seconds, would be a challenging question perhaps, but do you think the large complex accounts, and by large complex accounts I mean particularly thinking of our largest Airmic members, do you think they'll be the last to feel the real benefit of these innovations around automation and robotics?
If we talk about large risks and large claims, then probably yes. While if you are referring to large carriers or big carriers where transactional volumes are high, absolutely they should be onto it now and implementing this right now. But I personally don't think that in the near future for big risks, whether it is underwriting or whether it is settlement of claims, this technology will be used significantly. And again, by this technology I mean definitely the digital worker. Perhaps an element of digital thinker and digital reader could be deployed, but definitely not the digital worker.
Yeah, I think we can use a lot of analytics, data modeling, and so on to assist with decision making in complex areas and on larger risks. But I don't think it should be, fully automated. I think it needs to be done in conjunction with people who have that experience and can put things into the right context.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone who logged on today. The whole webinar will be available to view again on the Airmic website, and it will also be, I think, emailed to those who logged on in the next couple of days. And thank you also to our 3 speakers from QBE, Amit Dixit, Scott Jacobs, and Lucy Costin. Thank you very much, and see you soon.